Sea fog lifts off the Iron Coast and reveals Berk the way stories remember it. A village built against the wind, roofs stitched together by ropes and stubbornness, every child learning the weight of an axe before the alphabet. The new How to Train Your Dragon opens on competence and conflict, not cuteness. Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III is exactly where he shouldn't be, on a ridge above the harbor with a contraption no one asked him to build. He's thin where his tribe is broad, precise where they are loud. The first attack comes like weather. Dragons bloom out of cloud and flame in coordinated raids that look less like monsters and more like a rival culture with better wings. Stoik the Vast, chief, father, storm in human form, organizes a defense with muscle memory. The tribe answers as if the island itself took a breath. While shields clap and catapults speak, Hiccup threads the chaos to prove a point no one asked him to prove. He fires a net launcher of his own design into a night sky that has never once listened to him and hits the unhittable, a night fury that arrives like a silence. The film treats the shot as an accident wrapped in intention. Hiccup doesn't crow. He runs to see what being believed might feel like. The island's rules are simple and cruel in a way that makes sense to the people who live there. Dragons steal sheep, Vikings defend what's theirs, courage is measured by volume. The movie doesn't sneer at that logic. It respects the hardness that kept Berk standing against storms and fires and the kind of hunger that writes laws. Astrid Hofferson, all edges and focus, is the clearest expression of that code. She reads the world in threat vectors and honorable responses, and Hiccup's inventions register as disrespect because they refuse to share her grammar. Gobber, the blacksmith who is also a historian if you know how to listen, becomes our translator. He frames dragon lore as practical wisdom handed down from people who survived long enough to tell it. That context matters because the story refuses to be a comedy at the expense of the village. It is a negotiation with the village's past. Hiccup finds the night fury in a ravine the forest forgot, not dying but grounded, a perfect weapon wrapped in a body that looks back. The live-action staging lingers on textures, leathered wing membranes, a tail torn like a flag after battle, pupils that iris from knife edge to moon. Hiccup pulls a knife and learns that the hardest thing he will do is not use it. He cuts the ropes instead and the film names its thesis without saying it. Power begins when you choose not to be the thing your world made you. Toothless is not toothless yet, he is pain that cannot leave. Hiccup recognizes the shape of that feeling because he lives with it. Their bargain is physical before it is emotional, fish and distance, diagrams sketched into moss, a tail fin shaped out of wood and will. The bond forms as craft. A boy builds a solution inside the outline of a wound and earns the right to be near. Back in Berk, Stoik returns from a failed expedition to the dragon's nest with the look of a man who thinks love is a war you win by killing its cause. He smells smoke on his son and assumes shame, then recruits him for dragon training because custom demands it. The training arena is theater and test at once. Astrid, Snotlout, Fishlegs, Roughnut and Toughnut each embody a different tactic the village trusts. Aggression, bravado, book learning, chaos, more chaos. Hiccup's presence disturbs the ecosystem. He doesn't fight the way the rules want, he observes and improvises. He learns that dragons fear eels, sneeze at pepper, purr when scratched under armored chins. He applies those discoveries in the ring, turning near disaster into controlled confusion. The kids hate him more for succeeding. The adults are too busy surviving to notice. The audience does because the movie has already taught us to see utility where the tribe sees insult. Hiccup's double life opens into a rhythm the film plays like music, day in the ring, night in the ravine. Toothless tolerates him, then trusts him, then tests him. The repaired tail changes Hiccup's posture. The boy leans toward wind and begins to understand flight as agreement, not domination. Early rides are messy and funny without cruelty, stalls and spirals and a single clean arc over water that stops the movie long enough to let joy be the only plot. These sequences serve character first and spectacle second. Hiccup learns that control is a shared verb, Toothless learns that vulnerability has a return on investment. The larger story learns that training belongs to both species. Astrid watches. She has the best eyes in the cohort and the film rewards that trait by making her right more often than she is wrong. She clocks Hiccup's new timing, his new balance, a smile he doesn't know he wore. Suspicion fits her like armor, curiosity chafes. When Hiccup begins to win in the arena by refusing to harm the dragons, Astrid registers it as betrayal and brilliance at once. The tribe reads a prophecy in his performance, Hiccup the dragon killer, and schedules the public kill that will cement his name. Hiccup learns this the hour he finally climbs beyond cloud with Toothless and sees the world pressed flat by height. The movie refuses to let that high last. It is earned but not permanent. He drops back to a life that expects him to be the shape of a legend he no longer wants. The middle act is choice under pressure for everyone who matters. Hiccup tries to confess to Stoik and finds himself arguing with a wall built by grief and responsibility. Stoik's love is misdelivered as volume because volume kept men like him alive, and the film never makes him a villain for surviving. He hears night fury and friend and processes shame and danger. He pulls Hiccup out of training with a tenderness that reads like exile and heads back to the sea with a fleet, convinced that if he can finish the war, he can finish the fear in his son's eyes. A different movie would punish that mistake with humiliation. This one treats it as the honest endpoint of a worldview running out of runway. Astrid's arc pivots on a tree line and a sound. She follows Hiccup into the forest and finds the ravine that holds a secret large enough to rewrite her. Toothless pins her to the earth with predator ease, and the film lets the fear be real. There is no quip, no instant charm. Hiccup begs space from a creature that doesn't owe him any and earns it by standing between teeth and the person who would expose them both. Astrid doesn't melt, she recalculates. The compromise is a ride she doesn't want, a scream that turns into an expletive that turns into a laugh she tries to swallow. The sky makes insurgents of them all. The first wide shot of three silhouettes over water, boy, girl, dragon, feels like permission, when Toothless drops into a stall. Hiccup trusts a move he shouldn't know, and Astrid learns the difference between falling and being held by physics. Their conversion is not romantic first, it is epistemological. Experience becomes data, data refuses to fit the old conclusions. The villagers' dragon lore gains nuance as Hiccup and Astrid begin to read it with field notes. Monstrous nightmares aren't fury, they're pressure management with flame as a tool. Deadly natters aren't vanity, they're threat displays built to avoid conflict if they can. Gronkles are not dumb, they are specialized. Each discovery changes Hiccup's body language in training and changes Astrid's admiration against her will. Snotlout remains comic resistance to humility. Fishlegs updates his recitations with conditions. The twins treat every new rule as a dare. The arena stops being a proving ground and becomes a classroom led by a student who didn't ask to teach. The film widens gently to show the ecosystem that created the war. Raids aren't malice, they're quotas. Smaller dragons bring food to something larger that eats intention as easily as it eats sheep. Stoics' expeditions keep returning to the same empty ocean because the nest uses geography as armor. Hiccup realizes Toothless is a compass with a heartbeat, the only way to find the place no map owns. That knowledge brands him with a kind of loneliness common to protagonists who learn too fast. He can't unknow what he knows, and he can't yet say it in a language his father won't hear as treason. Character development sharpens in dialogue that feels like people trying, not screenwriters performing cleverness. Hiccup doesn't sell friendship with dragons as a moral, he sells it as a solution that might keep people he loves from dying. Astrid doesn't apologize for wanting to swing an axe. She admits that certainty felt like safety, and she misses how clean that used to be. Gobber doesn't deliver a monologue, he mutters a history of losing things and learning to repurpose what's left, an arm, a leg, a worldview. Stoic has no words for any of it, and the movie respects that silence by letting it be full of intent, not ignorance. The public kill approaches and the village turns its fear into pageantry. Banners, drums, the arena dressed like a wedding to an old god. Hiccup walks in wearing fame like a costume that itches. Astrid stands at the edge of the ring with a secret that could save him and a code that says he should not need saving. Toothless waits in the ravine and feels the bond as absence. The setup is clean. A boy expected to kill the thing he has learned to love. A girl expected to cheer for a future she no longer wants. A father expected to watch his legacy be validated in blood. The film holds the moment long enough to let the audience taste the trap. What happens in the ring is not the climax, it's the pressure vessel cracking along the line we've been watching form. Hiccup cannot follow the script. The dragon he's meant to kill reads his refusal before the crowd does and lowers its spines the way animals do when a threat becomes a question. For a breath, Berk watches a new grammar writing itself in a circle of sand. Someone flinches, the old grammar flares, the dragon panics, and the arena becomes a physics problem with teeth. Hiccup survives the beat because he has practiced improvisation with a teacher who never uses words. Astrid intervenes without stealing his agency. Gobber moves like a man who once had two hands and decided living was better than winning anyway. The sequence ends not in triumph but in exposure. Hiccup's secret is now everyone's problem. The last stretch before the explicit climax is consequence and alignment. Hiccup doesn't get to argue theory anymore, he has to argue logistics. He tells Stoic the location strategy in language a sailor can respect: wind, flight corridors, feeding patterns. He admits to freeing a night fury and thereby owns both guilt and solution. Stoic hears all of it and makes the worst good decision he can. He chains the only compass that can find the nest to a ship headed for it. The father isn't punishing his son, he's weaponizing hope. The audience should hate him and can't because the film has built him out of love that knows only one direction. Astrid chooses a side that isn't a side so much as a plan. She doesn't just back Hiccup, she improves him. She forces him to say the words he's been staging around: I hit him, I hurt him, if I'm going to fix anything I have to do it all the way. She accepts the cost of being seen as disloyal to a code that kept her alive. She does not apologize to the tribe, she makes them better at math. Their partnership snaps into a version the animated films promised and the live-action honors. She is not his shadow or his skeptic. She's the co-architect of a future both can live in. The younger trainees evolve from foils into allies in a way that feels earned. Fishlegs translates terror into data the way only a true nerd can, nomming tail angles and flame durations as if reciting a prayer. Snotlot hides fear under volume until the moment volume fails and then learns the quieter sound of courage. The twins remain chaos, but direct it like demolition experts instead of children with sticks. Each has a moment that will matter in the unseen climax, and the script seeds those beats here as habits rather than hero shots. Hiccup returns to the ravine to find Toothless rattling a chain he cannot break. The scene is quiet and heartbreaking without declaration. Toothless doesn't blame, but he remembers. Hiccup doesn't grovel, but he owns. The repair is not words, it's labor. He adjusts the tailfin again, straps again, calibrates again. He speaks softly to a creature who controls whether the next hour ends in reunion or regret. The bond reasserts itself as they do the thing only they can: leave the ground together. The camera holds on the threshold between forest and sky because that is where Hiccup's life keeps changing. The fleet cuts toward fog thick enough to hide a mistake. Stoic is a weapon aimed at a nest he cannot imagine. The nest is less a place than an organism, a forced economy hive built around a feeder so large it warps the idea of what a dragon is for. The film does not show the full body yet. It shows the effect: smaller dragons dumping tribute, a sky reluctant to clear, a sense that the war between Berk and dragons was always a proxy war between creatures who fear scarcity and something that manufactures it. Hiccup and Astrid crest the fog line at the moment. The fleet commits to a path that has no off-ramp. They will have to solve a problem that generations called impossible without becoming the kind of people their grandchildren will fear. The approach to the climax is all calculus with heartbeats. Who knows what when, which dragon fits which rider, how many seconds of glide a damaged tail buys in crosswind, whether Stoic can unlearn one thing fast enough to learn another. Whether Toothless will risk heat he cannot sustain because the boy on his back trusts him more than he deserves. The movie respects spatial logic so action makes emotional sense. Distances are distances. Speed feels paid for. Failure has physics attached. It stops the camera on faces when it matters. A father seeing his son not as a disappointment but as a resource. A chief seeing a dragon not as a curse but as a partner. A village seeing a future that will not fit on the flag it's been waving. We cut before the decisive blows and the irrefutable losses, as a recap should. The final images we're willing to name are the ones that make the last stretch inevitable without giving it away. Toothless banking into a column of rising heat like a bead sliding onto a wire. Astrid on the back of a natter calling vectors with a voice that doesn't shake. Stoic standing on a prow that used to mean certainty and now means trust. Hiccup adjusting a strap and a plan at the same time because that's who he is now. The score holds a single note, not triumphant, not tragic, charged. After this, the feature answers the questions the franchise keeps earning. What a family looks like when it stops mistaking sameness for safety. What a nation looks like when it stops confusing tradition with truth. What a friendship looks like when it has to pass a test neither partner chose. The new How to Train Your Dragon earns its live action by honoring weight of bodies of tools of choices, and by letting characters grow without losing the parts of themselves that made the old story worth bringing back. If you want the literal outcome, who returns whole, who returns changed, who draws a new map for Berk, the movie holds it. What this recap can promise is the pleasure of watching a world that believed in strength learn to believe in precision, and a boy who thought he had to get louder learn to fly by listening.